Good evening and welcome to this first broadcast of New Abolitionist Radio through Be Live TV. We just want to thank those at Be Live TV for accepting us into their beta testing program, and we definitely will give you some feedback. For those who are watching us right now on Facebook, we are going to talk about Donald Trump's austerity measures and what it could mean in terms of prison slavery, the modern day slavery system and human trafficking that is ongoing here in the United States, of course, all authorized by the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So you know me and Max from New Abolitionist Radio, which we air every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Black Talk Radio Network. We're going to try to do more little broadcasts like this exclusively on our New Abolitionist Radio page. So if you're not following the New Abolitionist Radio page, you need to go ahead and hit that like button right now. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So, Max, I shared an article with you earlier about the austerity measures that Trump is calling a budget and other people are calling a budget. There is a whole lot of buzz around these austerity measures, and I wanted to get your analysis of your overall thoughts on the budget or the austerity measures, and then later we'll get into how this could increase the prison population. Your thoughts, Max?
Would you like me to begin now?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Hello to everybody listening in this initial broadcast here on Be Live TV with Scotty Reed through blackwork.com. As you said, I'm Max Parthas from New Abolitionist Radio. Yeah, Scotty, I did retail, folks I'm coming from. Look at things through the veil. Like, I can see the counterparts of what was going on at the abolitionist movement of the late 1800s right now. So I look at it through that veil. So what was going on then? And when I look at it through that vision, because, I'm somewhat anti-political, I say personally that these devils are going to do what they're going to starve you. They're going to take away they'll take away everything they could possibly take from you in a high crime area of impoverished, desperate people doing desperate things to each other so that they can put you into these cells and cages that are economic development programs who supply goods and services and products to those prisons that we have all across America right now. I was reading some of it talking about, and it was almost like listening to someone describe a murder in detail, and all the gory things were coming out. Like, we're going to get the nick, we're going to drag his body over to the stand, then we're going to raise it. That's how it felt to me, Scott. You know what I mean? Because that's what they're doing. They don't care about the humans that are here. As we said, we're dealing with a human rights crisis in America, and it's about to get worse. My history book is right here, The Black Cross, the gift that was given to me on my birthday, and I can read firsthand headlines of history all the way from 1778 up to 1950. I want to know what's happening today. All I have to do with what they were doing then. The tactics say to think of them political terms. But this is it's piecing crimes against humanity, getting away with murder, literally. Remember, because something doesn't make it right.
That's
my analysis.
I was taking a look at it myself and all the different programs, and the thing that stood out to me the most was the HUD program, the cuts that's going to come as a result. For those who don't know what HUD does, what is that? Human urban development or something like that? Housing and urban development. Now they oversee
Yeah, housing urban development.
Yeah, they oversee a lot of the affordable housing in the country. Now, the way that they've been framing it, though, is they're trying to make people believe that only people who live in the cities, in quote unquote urban areas, are the ones who benefit from affordable housing. Max, you have been to my home here in Mount Holly, North Carolina, where I don't live in the city. I live in, out in the country. And you know that I live in a predominantly white area. It is a lot of poor people up here, and a lot of them also need housing assistance, whether they're using that assistance to, subsidize an apartment because they do have public housing apartments here in these rural areas, or whether they're getting a voucher, which is known as the Voucher 8 program, to pay rent on a house or on a trailer. And so it's a lot of poor people here who are predominantly white. But I see that politicians, especially of the right-wing variety, they like to put a black face on HUD. And I think that's why Dr. Ben Carson was made the HUD secretary, so he can put the black face on it as they get ready to decimate these affordable housing programs. And so that's the first thing that stuck out at me. Here's a quote from Robert Rector, who is a senior fellow who focuses on quote unquote welfare at the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative Washington, D.C. think tank. He calls these community block grants slush funds for urban government. So that's what he thinks of them. Again, I live in a rural country area. Gaston County has been known as the meth capital of North Carolina. And it used to be like cotton mills were the primary employers around here. We may have 2 cotton mills open, whereas before there were probably about 10 within driving distance. People are hurting all over this country, but I fear they're going to try to make it seem like only black people use these programs, when in fact it is mainly white people who use these programs. And not that I want to frame it in a racial discussion, but we have poor people of all different stripes who will suffer as a result. Seniors will suffer. It's going to put some cuts to some of the senior programs. And I just, fear that things are going to really get bad here. It's going to look like Greece was looking a few months ago, or not that long ago, with the austerity measures and the bank holidays that was issued there. I just feel like it's going to get bad for a whole lot of people.
There's a couple of quotes in here too that stood out to me. One was my thought process. It says, cutting that program would be nothing short of a disaster. And the ripple of urban areas and some rural areas all over America. So he's talking about this as a disaster situation. And that's really how I'm looking at it. I'm one of the people who my future is in jeopardy. I don't know what's going to happen. As you know, we got flooded out and lost our home, our second home in a row. Prior to that, the first home was stolen in a seller's contract. After that, we got flooded out in a 1,000-year flood. Now is temporary housing that FEMA helped us to establish. And we have a daughter who is battling bone cancer right now. So all the problems that he thinks he's cutting right now, a lot of them affect me directly. By the time we get to the march in August 19th in Washington, D.C., our own stability is highly in question. So I understand these things are going to occur, but we're dealing with crimes against humanity. You're not going to negotiate your way out of this with people who want you dead and don't care about you. As a matter of fact, one other quote that was in here where I forget who said it, but basically said poor people need to have some inspiration to get up and go to work. So that, and then when they started quoting Nixon, I was kind of done.
Yeah. Now, here again, they really need to practice deception in order to get people to buy into this. So Donald Trump has fooled a lot of people during the the campaigning process, where people thought he was a populist candidate. They were, he talked about draining the swamp in Washington, D.C. But what it looks like they're going to do is drain these social programs that many people rely on. Now, when I hear people talk about that, look, it's people that work at Walmart who rely on food stamps or may rely on Section 8 vouchers in order to survive out here. It's not that they're lazy. It's not that they're uninspired. It's the fact that there is a lack of jobs in this country. Now, Donald Trump ran on talking about how NAFTA destroyed many jobs here in America and that we're going to put people to work and we're going to bring the jobs back. Well, it seems to me, if you were so concerned about that you would first bring the jobs back before you then start cutting these very vital programs for the working poor. Okay, we're not talking about, and then when I hear people, and it's just a shame, I hear the same old right-wing rhetoric, and people say, well, people shouldn't live off of welfare. Well, nobody's living off welfare. Don't y'all recall the Clinton welfare reform where he worked with Republicans to where now there's like a 5-year limit on you being able to draw benefits. So nobody's living off of welfare, and many of these people do in fact have jobs. Look, my daughter who does get food assistance for her son, all right, she has 2 jobs. She has 2 jobs, okay, because one job, they don't provide enough hours for her for it to be really considered full-time. And she's also like a assistant manager, all right? And so then she just recently got a 2nd job. So I don't know what, again, these people are just buying into the rhetoric that everybody who needs assistance is just looking for a handout. No, people need a hand up. And Donald Trump, again, during the campaign, talked about a lack of jobs.
I was raised by my great aunt and uncle, not by my own mother, but my great aunt and uncle. My great aunt was raised in turn by former slaves who came here from the South, as a matter of fact, from Georgia to Paterson, New Jersey to start a new life. And raised her. That's how close my heritage of this circumstance goes. And like you, Scotty, growing up in the 60s, we have seen some things that are very familiar to today, like the National Guard when they came into Newark, the assassinations of Martin, Malcolm. That's some of my earliest memories. Same with you, I would assume.
I mean, I was fairly young, but again, because of the internet, we can go back and watch documentaries during that time. But I was born in 66, Max.
66, okay. Yeah, well, my first memory is with my great aunt in the living room watching a black and white television and watching her cry because they had just assassinated Martin Luther King Jr. And then growing up in the environment where the loving laws play in 67, where my parents couldn't even get married. People say these are some of the worst racial tensions we've ever seen, but you may not remember those things as well as I do. We haven't reached the worst yet. It can get much worse. We just had a conversation earlier today with some people saying, what happens in a scenario where you got Snoop Dogg now doing a video which is faking a fake death of Trump. Imagine if a black man shot Trump right now today. What do you think would happen immediately? People would lose their damn minds and take all them and then storing in their preppers camps and black people like every place was Wall Street, Black Wall Street all over again. It really is just that serious. I mean, would you think anything else would happen, Scotty?
No. I mean, it would be chaos. And, I heard people talking about that video, man, and talking about the Illuminati. Look, I ain't into conspiracy theories. Snoop Dogg is just trying to capitalize off of, the high spirit that's going on right now. I don't think the Illuminati is involved in it. And I don't see how anything he's doing is, raising the issue of human trafficking and slavery in this country.
Yes. Well, I guess my point is that watching as they piece by piece dismantle every single asset that is available for the poor, for the homeless, for the downtrodden, for the oppressed, for the children, for all of the most vulnerable communities, to see them start tearing that away, and then even taking away the simple things like arts, which means so much to the souls of our children, taking away funding for that. To see these things are not unfamiliar, but I do know where they're heading. And I don't think there's a lot we can do at this point to be able to prevent them from moving in that direction. We have to start thinking a little bit more long term, which is one of the reasons why I'm so committed to this August 19th March on Washington, because you and I both know, and many others know, that the root cause of a lot of this revolves around that whole prison and justice for sale and policing for profit industries. And when you address that, by default, you're addressing everything else. And if we get anything like disclosure, which we're asking for in the form of congressional hearings on the 13th Amendment, then it'll be like turning the lights on and watching the cockroaches come out. People will be shocked to the core of their beings to find out exactly what has been going on and how bad it has been and who has been involved. Just recently, Sean King put out an article, I believe it was the New York Times, where he said that no president who owns slaves should be honored. Well, let me ask Sean King. Barack Obama had between in 2010 $3 million and $11 million invested in the Vanguard Group. The Vanguard Group is one of the largest investors in the construction of private prisons. If you own stock in the private prisons, by default, you own people, because that's what their stock is valued on. So does he also apply that same thing to Barack Obama? Does he apply it to George Bush and Dick Cheney, who had $80 million of his own money invested in private prisons, and him and Alberto Gonzalez ended up being indicted for racketeering charges in Texas in 2008. So does he apply it to them as well? See, there's that cognitive dissonance thing that comes in where, because of the transfer of slavery from the individual owning it to the state owning it, people just got confused about what was going on. But we're right back to that people can own people thing again. And there are presidents who are alive today who had millions and millions of dollars in stock of their own money invested in whether or not certain groups were going into jails and prisons.
You know, for the people who may be for the first time tuning in to a broadcast of New Abolitionist Radio, which again comes on every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on blacktalkradionetwork.com. We are not, if you want to play partisan games, we are not the people for that. You just heard Max tell you how much Barack Obama had invested in Vanguard. And I actually put out an article and pointed out last year when Hillary Clinton released her taxes, her investments in the Vanguard 500 fund, and which, like you already pointed out, is heavily invested in private prisons and what have you. So if you're looking for a partisan fight, we are not those people. A slaver is a slaver. We don't care what their party label is. And the fact is, both of these parties support slavery. But tonight we're talking about the austerity measures that are being proposed by Donald Trump in what he's calling a budget. And it is fully supported by Republicans. And some people have just tried to make it about Donald Trump and say, oh, they just attacking Donald Trump. Look, this ain't about Donald Trump. Okay, this is about the austerity measures that Republicans have been wanting to put in place for a very, very, very long time. There are going to be cuts to the SNAP program. Most people call it food stamps. We've already talked about HUD. There's going to be cuts to senior citizens programs. And what do you think is going to happen if you take this safety net from under the working poor? Well, people are going to be forced to commit crimes of survival. And Max, I think that's exactly what they want.
That's what I said early on, man. It's strategy the lives of people, and you get rid of the people you don't want around anymore. But see, there's a lot of us. There is a lot of us. And just one of the things they're doing, for example, is testing how far they can go, what they can get away with by this mass immigration move where they're arresting these immigrants and putting them in these for-profit private detention facilities and storing their bodies there. There's, as we talked about last night, a lawsuit that's going on right now with as many as 60,000 immigrants who are a historical lawsuit where they're suing the GEO group for slave labor practices, not only incarcerating them, but forcing them to work for pennies on the dollar or nothing. And that's happening right now with the GEO group. And we know that Jan Mickelson called for that last year specifically to be done.
Max, we got a comment. Let me see if I can throw this comment up here. All right, let me read this comment from Mr. Christopher Walker. This government was responsible for the death of Martin Luther King Jr. We must develop our own. We will not respond. They will not respond to our cries. We must let them go. Do we need another 5, 30, 50, 100, 400 years of genocide? Stop talking and make them. We are African and American. Well, again, we appreciate your input. The new abolitionist movement is not a race-based movement. We are, as the name implies, an abolitionist movement. We want to end slavery as legalized by the 13th Amendment. Now, people can talk about building their own, and I assume he's talking about building black businesses and stuff like that. How long do you think? I mean, really, what does that have to do with slavery? How many Black Wall Streets do we have to see throughout history get burnt down to know that you are not going to buy your way out of slavery? You are not going to do it, okay? And we want to free the enslaved. We ain't worried about. I'm not in prison. I'm not a slave presently, okay? I live on family land that's been in our family for hundreds of years before the European invasion, okay? I have had a little brother that has been enslaved. He's not enslaved anymore, but this ain't about me personally. This is about the continuation of slavery in this country. Again, this is why we do want to point out the racial disparities and who they're targeting for prison slavery. Make no mistake, they're targeting everybody has a target on their back, so to speak. So we're talking about ending slavery, okay? And you are welcome to come out on August the 19th to Washington, D.C., which will be the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March, where we will hopefully be spreading more information to the world to let them know this isn't mass incarceration, and the United States did not abolish slavery in 1865. The 13th Amendment makes it plain and clear that slavery is reserved for those that they convict of crimes. You know, most of these austerity measures are going to cause people to have to do things that they otherwise might not do in order to survive, and I believe it's by design so that it can increase the number of prison slaves. Max, your thoughts?
Brother Christopher Walker, he said on August 19th, that's our point where we make them. Imagine if 10 million people show up. Imagine if 5 million people show up. Imagine if 24 million people show up, because that's how many people, if you just send in one representative person that's going through this injustice system, that's how many people would be in the streets. I mean, they tell us that we can't have with 24 million people in the street. Did it? Why can't we do it? We need to come together across under an abolition. The intent not to reform humanity is an oxymoron. Reform a crime against humanity. Instead, we seek to. We found that the weak exception clause, because we know that exception clause has been exploited and is still being exploited. And another option as well is to admit constitutional violations like the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, 8th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment, which are violated every single day. And you can include the First Amendment if you think about the lawsuit that's going on right now with Byron Allen showing that the U.S. government purposely held funds from black media to silence black media. So all of these constitutional violations are being done to us every day, and the 13th Amendment is being exploited every day. So we feel like if we address that core issue, first framing it properly as slavery, and then secondly, attempting to abolish it as slavery, that we could come up with some great ideas afterwards on how to set in new systems and what to do with all those hundreds of billions of dollars that will no longer be necessary to incarcerate innocent people. And we know, based on current studies by very well-respected different universities, that as many as 40% of our total prison population can be released today without any ill effects on society, and as many as 60% to 70% should have never even been there to begin with. It's a lot of money that we need to let go to put into services that will instead provide people with the tools they need to avoid such things.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, providing people with tools that they need. Among some of the programs that will be cut are worker training programs, to where people lose their jobs or industry shuts down, like, the cotton mill industries in the South, textile, I should say, industry shut down, where there were programs in place that allowed those people to go to community college and either become a nurse or a truck driver, or, help them while they transition into a new field. So those are some of the programs that are on the chopping block. I mean, there's stuff all across the board. But I want to again go back to what the point that Mr. Walker raised. We not begging, we not crying, we demanding, that slavery be abolished. All right, we ain't begging on our knees. All right, we demand it. And just think if people like Nat Turner, not Nat Turner, but he was an abolitionist, but Frederick Douglass, some of the other famous abolitionists. What if they just said, you know what, let's just, build up our little black communities, and we're not going to worry about them enslaved Africans. We free now, so, we just going to build up our own communities, and we just going to trade with each other and start our own businesses. Well, history has shown that then people get jealous, and because they full of racist hate, they come and they burn them down, or they terrorize the people and run them off their own property. But just think, though, if the abolitionists back then had that kind of mentality, do you think that there would have been a civil war? And let's make no mistake, the Civil War was about slavery. It was about slavery. And then it was because of the abolitionists agitating on the issue of slavery in this country that the Civil War occurred, and then we were able to free ourselves once we were allowed on that battlefield and what have you. So we're about some realistic solutions here. There are people who are suffering, who are being tortured in these prisons, be anything you can imagine about the horrors of plantation slavery are going on inside those walls on these prison plantations. And I can't just sit out here on the outside and just work on my little small business, and just worried about Black Talk Radio Network and getting as many clients as I can and not be concerned about this very real issue that's going on, and that's slavery and human trafficking in this country. Max?
There's that stigma, Scotty. There's that stigma, of course, as to prisoners, but also applies to poor people or the disabled or, LGBT communities or immigrant communities, these stigmas that they put on them. And one of them, for instance, with the prisoners is if you're in a jail or a prison, you must have done something to deserve it. And after that, you just tend to forget that they even exist. But what people might not understand is that of all the prisoners across the entire globe right now, 1 in 8 of them are represented by a black man in America. That's how many black men are in prison here in this country right now, that 1 in 8 of the entire globe's total is represented by black men. Also, we know that in this country, we are incarcerating 6 times the amount that was occurring in South Africa during the height of apartheid. So it's real hard. It's real hard for me to even talk about these things and try to understand how people don't get it and don't have compassion for those who are suffering. When you hear things like the FBI say that 96% of all arrests are for nonviolent crimes. 96% of all arrests for nonviolent crimes. But the narrative you hear on the news is that we're all murderers, and killers, and gangsters, and thieves, and robbers, and liars, and on welfare. Man, we have a lot of energy to spare, don't we?
See,
it's a false narrative.
That's why in my own conversations, I've been trying to be mindful, because I know how the media works, and I know how much anti-blackness is out there in the world. And so that's why I don't try to assign any color to any kind of slave. A slave is a slave is a slave, okay? And slavers look just like us, okay? We have reported on New Abolitionist Radio. What's your boy name down there in Mississippi or Alabama?
Christopher Epson. He's the fall guy in that story, yes. He's the fall guy in that story.
So we have people that look like us who are willing participants. So that's why I'm not trying to color code, this human rights issue. It's a human rights issue. And everybody who cares about their fellow human beings need to get involved. And so maybe you may not have a person in your family who is affected by slavery, but that would be hard to imagine, being that how many people have run through the system and how many people have been labeled with that felony slave status. Again, going back to what Max said about the march, most of us have a family member that's been affected by this or who is on a prison plantation right now. You need to turn out for them. You need to turn out to this march. And if you can't make the march, I understand everybody not into marching and stuff. It's a tool. It's just one tool. It's a tool to raise awareness, to let people know we mean business, okay? But if that's not your thing, well, get in where you fit in. Like we like to say on New Abolitionist Radio, we want to kill this beast, death by 1,000 paper cuts if need be. So however you become creative and figure out how you can lend a hand in ending slavery and human trafficking, then do that. Do that. I'm not about to get on here and criticize what other people do in order to end this system. Get in where you fit in. So we're just hoping to raise further awareness that this is slavery. This ain't mass incarceration. This ain't over incarceration. It ain't none of that. This is a continuation of slavery. And they fooled us through the miseducation, through the public school system, and through their movies, through Hollywood, into making us think that this issue was settled at the conclusion of the Civil War, and nothing could be further from the truth. So we just trying to inform people and perhaps motivate them to become new abolitionists. I hear people talking about, well, if I was alive back then, I would have did such and such, or I wouldn't have done this or that. Okay, well, you don't have to imagine. You live in that time period now where it's actually worse than it was prior to 1865.
We are everything that our ancestors dreamed of right now. We are it. We are what they needed. We're here, and it's our time to make this difference. These programs that are being cut and the bills that are going to go into effect. We could not stop a bill in Missouri that criminalized children as young as 7 years old, who now legally can be charged with a felony for schoolyard fights or breaking school property. You're talking about kids in first grade who can be charged with felonies. We couldn't stop that. We're not going to be able to stop a lot of this stuff. Not using the same methods we have always used. It's time to try something new. We have this thing called the Declaration of Independence. We have these things called the Bill of Rights. And in that Declaration of Independence, one of your main rights, the very first thing they talk about, is your right to abolish a government that is not serving you. You don't ask them to please step aside. You don't just, open the door and let them walk out or whatever. You hold them accountable for their crimes against humanity and you abolish them. You abolish that whatever it is you need to abolish. And that's what we're coming in to do now. We don't want to fix the prison system. We're not an abolitionist, but there's going to be a lot of prisons that need to be shut down. There are people who deserve to be freed. How hard is that to understand that there are 2.4 million people as static number? Remember, that's like a living thing. It's people going in and out all day long. So on any given day, 2.3 million people in prison, and we're talking about as many as 60% shouldn't even be there. Do you care? We need to start caring. And we need to stop trying to use the same tactics to fight battles we never seem to win. We've got a new tactic. It's called abolition. It starts with the 13th Amendment. Don't think it can't happen. I've talked with the NAACP, as you know, Scotty, in some recording, where they said to me that they do not support any at a reinterpretation of the Constitution because it's a hostile climate. First of all, ending slavery ain't never had a friendly climate. It just did not ever exist and is never going to exist. That's the first thing. The second thing is that many don't know that Republicans are a constitutional convention backed by international corporations. As of last year, there were only 6 states away from success at the Constitutional Convention. If we are not prepared to address the 13th Amendment by the time they get this into play, that window will have opened and closed with us standing there with our hands in our pockets. So anyway, Scotty, I don't want to rant too much, but those are important things to
address. Because this came up last night on last night's broadcast of New Abolitionist Radio. I can't remember the brother's name. Tony called in and he was saying...
Tony Crane.
What's that?
Tony Crane, yep.
Yeah, and he
Shout
called
out Tony
in
Crane.
and he was saying we need to go to Africa. People need to go to Africa. And I hear people say that. But like I pointed out to him, you can't run and hide nowhere on this planet. Ain't nowhere safe from slavery. And we pointed out that a UK-based company called G4S is the largest employer on the continent of Africa. And guess what they employ people?
Private employer, yeah.
What's that, Max?
Private employer.
Yeah, the largest. Yeah, it's good to make the distinction. The largest private employer. Guess what they employ people doing? They employ Africans to enslave other Africans in prisons. We talked about last night, Haiti, Geo Group, the second largest private prison enslaver in the world, based right here in the United States in Boca Raton, Florida, opening up after the hurricane. What did they do? They open up a private prison. That's how they gonna help people find jobs in Haiti. Employ Haitians, enslaving other Haitians. Okay, so I just want to make it clear: you can't run from this. You can't hide from this. And I'm not trying to call anybody cowards, but I ain't never ran from no fight.
We are not criminals like that, Scotty. We're not the demons we're being made out to be as a people. Most of these times, these areas that they call high crime areas in urban areas or country areas or wherever it may be, high poverty, have been carefully crafted to be the way they are, starting with redlining, with the banks, where they push people of color into certain areas and then refused any kind of economic improvement. Money just never went towards that. Right here in South Carolina, in Charleston, one of my brothers was protesting where they just spent $1 million on a swimming pool on the rich side of Charleston, but on the poor side, they can't get nothing. So we see these things happening all over the country, over and over again. So they craft these areas. They want them to be high crime rates so these police will have jobs. As you saw in the film where the New York Police Department officers from all over the precincts and was telling people about how they have these quotas that they have to fill. The same thing has applied in Missouri. There's been lawsuits all over the country where police have sued their departments for forcing them to go out and hunt people to fill quotas. How can you have a quota in a police department? Well, I'll tell you how you can have it. Because you got contracts with prisons guaranteeing 80 to 100% occupancy for as much as 25 years. While you got quotas, and they had these things like in Arizona called low crime taxes, where if the prison beds are not filled, then the taxpayer has to pay for that loss that the prisons would have earned. So what the states have started doing now is practicing trafficking, where if the GEO group has a prison in Arizona that is not quite full, you could send some people from California there. If Vermont has too many prisoners, they can send them over to Michigan to the same company. If Texas has too many prisoners, they can send them also to another state. At this moment, there's a prison in Arizona that only houses Hawaiians called Eloy. So if you get in trouble in Hawaii, guess where you're going? You imagine what that does to the families? They can't even see you no more unless they pay $10
imagine
for 15 minutes of viewing.
Imagine what it does to the new enslaved person.
Yes, it's horrible, man, and it's practiced widespread across the entire country. But it's behind closed doors.
I talked to Sister Maui the other day. Last week sometime I interviewed her about the situation in Hawaii, and she shared a personal story with me, and she said that her older brother has been in the prison system for 8 years, and they can't even find him. They can't even locate him. Whenever they call to find out where he's at, they get to run around. You know what I'm saying?
I have a friend
crazy.
Out in Rhode Island or Boston, actually, Cole Rodriguez, she can't find her boyfriend. Like they just moving them around and not telling anybody where they're at. And there were just congressional hearings on the company that actually transports the prisoners or the captives from one prison to another. If you remember what was going on during those congressional hearings, they found out that people were literally disappearing in transit and then cause unknown listed as to what happened to them. They even had testimony where some of the drivers reported that in at least one incident, there was someone right behind him getting raped, right behind him while he's driving. Abuse was going on. As I mentioned, people were disappearing off of the vans and trucks, never to be seen again. And this was all testified right before Congress.
Max, this is also Women's History Month. I believe this is the month they observe women. And I'm going to keep repeating this, not just during this month. And it's not like we haven't brought it up before, but I posted a graph yesterday on Facebook and been sharing it around that since 1985, that women represent the biggest increase in the prison slave demographics, the prison slave population. And that 2/3 of these women who are in the state prisons have children. So, you know what? We're not even protecting our women. And that's just shameful. We are not even protecting our women, let alone protecting ourselves. We ain't protecting our women. And I'm just so tired of the tough talk and all that kind of stuff. And nothing's getting done. Nothing's getting done in the slave plantation just continues to expand with more and more. And now, even with the youth, the children are being targeted and criminalized at a very early age, as you mentioned about the Missouri law where they can slap felonies on you as a 5-year-old for having to fight on the playground. This has got to stop.
That's insane. It's insane. Like, how can we even call ourselves civilized knowing that something like that is in place? It's terrible, Scotty Reed. Indeed, it is, man.
Well, I do, Max, if you want to tell people if they are interested in participating and coming together on August the 19th in Washington, D.C., will you go ahead and tell them what's going down?
Yes, this is not a movement. We are serious about our stuff on this one. Express power and make demands. That's why we need millions in the street across all genres and ideologies and ethnicities. This is something where American citizens take power back for themselves, power to the people. Some of our primary concerns, well, first let me say this, our main goal, which we should all be able to agree on, is to end slavery in the United States of America once and for all. We expect to do that through a constitutional convention where we amend the 13th Amendment to take out the exception clause. We don't expect that to happen overnight, but we do expect to initiate congressional hearings for disclosure on the 13th Amendment and the effects that it has had on this society and these citizens for the last 152 years. This gives us an opportunity to really shine a light on some of these horrors that are occurring throughout our prison systems across the country. As you heard last night on New Abolitionist Radio, with the judges themselves are sitting there flaunting their power like they are many gods, where a young black woman came to before and the judge asked her a question and she said, yeah. And the judge said, I didn't say, give me a yes, say yes or no. She said, yeah, again. He raised her bail to $2,000. He raised it to $3,500. This is the type of godlike feelings that they think they have. So we're fighting against that, and we want disclosure for those things to come out. We need everybody to come. If you can't physically be there, then stay home and bang pots or do something that would join in somehow. But if you can physically get up off your behind and decide to be the reason that this succeeds, then come to Washington, D.C., August 19th, for the Millions for Prisoners March on Washington, Human Rights March on Washington. You can get information from IamWeUbuntu.com, that's IamWeUbuntu.com, and find out what's going on there. You can also register your groups. It's a very large coalition of grassroots organizations. We are not expecting any kind of media coverage, really, unless we force them to do it. And we're not expecting a whole lot of corporate money to come flowing in, because many of these corporations that are funding other groups are actually using prison slave labor and afraid of being disclosed themselves. So join us, be a part of it, go to the website, be a part of history. This is the time where we express our power as U.S. citizens.
The easiest way to get to the website and get to the page on the website is just simply type in a search engine, Millions for Prisoners Human Rights. Let me go ahead and throw that up on the screen. That is all right. Millions for Prisoners.
I was told that everybody is talking about it now, Scotty. I was informed that it is the talk of the town across the world right now. Angela Davis was confronted with it just recently. The chairman O'Malley was just confronted with it recently as well. With these questions, are you supporting the Millions for Prisoners March on Washington? So a lot of our leadership have been presented with this question now, and they have to think about it, because a lot of them have not spent too much time thinking about the 13th Amendment and whether or not we really can abolish slavery. Well, what was an impossible dream now is inevitable. So everybody's getting on board.
Well, Max, thanks for joining us, joining me tonight to do this impromptu broadcast. We want to try to do more of these, just little short, powwow sessions to where we can just get the information out to as many people as possible about 21st century slavery and human trafficking. Ain't no fence riding. If you are not against slavery, you must be for it. So that's all I have to say for tonight. Peace and blessings to all. And Max, what do you say?
Happy birthday to our Be Live inaugural broadcast right here. Hopefully we get a lot more of them out and reach a lot more people. And as always, Scotty, it's a pleasure to stand beside you and work beside you in this goal to end modern slavery in the United States. Catch us this Wednesday at New Abolitionist Radio. We guarantee it's going to just be an experience that you won't forget.
Peace and blessings to all. like the page, New Abolitionist Radio, and share it with your friends. Peace.
Peace.